Allons enfants de la patrie, le jour de gloire est arrivé.
Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of the Roker Report podcast in association with the Sunland Community Soup Kitchen. It's Gav and we're back for an impromptu episode of the show during our summer break because we've finally got something to talk about. We finally hired a new head coach. 48-year-old Frenchman Régis Le Bris, I think I've got that right, is the man to lead us forward, and he starts work on July the 1st, joining us from FC Lyon in France. Again, that's my pronunciations are getting better. To spearhead our assault on the championship next season. Without further ado, joining me today is Martin. Hello, mate.
Hello, mate. Well, yeah, my C at GCSE French will bow to your superior knowledge of French pronunciation, so we'll go with Regis. I thought his relation is Cyril.
Regis or Regis or... Yeah, it'll come out in the wash.
Régis Le Bris.
Well, it took me long enough to get me head round Adilo Sheesh, but I think I'm getting this one. I just keep forgetting his first name. No, I know it's Le Bris, and I was calling him Debris the other day, which is obviously wrong. But I keep forgetting his first name is Regis, yeah. We'll get there in the end. At some point, someone will correct us. Anyways, yeah, we've got a head coach, which is why me and you have got together today. And we all know it's took a bit of time to get to this point. I think anybody who reads the website will know that I've been quite patient about it all. I've been quite happy for them to take the time. My only ask was that it was done before pre-season, and has been. I thought, providing that they got the job done by that point, that it wouldn't affect too much, and the players come back on the 1st. He starts his job on the 1st, and happy days. We've got a head coach, right? I mean, how do you feel about it all? Just initial thoughts on the appointment. Are you excited about this one? How do you feel?
Intrigued, I think, more than excited. I think this is the first appointment of a head coach that's kind of gone along the lines of what I expected them to do. You know, you look at how we've recruited players and where we've recruited players from, and we've been, a bit adventurous, I guess, in player recruitment. Our managerial appointments, or head coach appointments, have been fairly predictable.
Yeah.
From Lee Johnson at the outset, to Alex Neil, to Tony Mowbray, to Michael Beale. Even though Michael Beale was kind of a little departure from that, it wasn't much of a departure, really, was it? It was somebody who was English, who had experience of the championship. We kind of knew what he was all about. Yeah. So this is the first one that, where I think we don't know much. We've obviously delved into stuff over the past 48 hours or however long it's been since he was appointed. But, until the middle of last week, I'd never heard of the fella. So
never, no.
it's intriguing. I think, you look at some of the things that you read about him, and obviously people have picked up on the fact he was relegated last season with Lorient. If he hadn't been relegated, he probably wouldn't be available. So you kind of take those two things and consider how they've played out for us. But it's exciting, I think. Maybe I am excited.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah, exciting because you talk about the fear of the unknown, but it's also a little bit, I'm excited because I don't know too much about him, and we still haven't heard from him. We haven't had an interview yet as we record this, and I'm sure the club are going to absolutely scupper this podcast and bring one out. But from what I've heard from people who've spoken to him, very measured, very considered. The impression that I got reading some of the stuff that had been put out about him in the French media over the last couple of years is that he's quite an enthusiastic person. Obviously, these are all things we'll come to learn over time. But there's a reason they've appointed him, right? There's got to be some reason why this guy was high up on the list. And they've obviously looked past the fact that Lorient got relegated. Now, I have to say, by the way, with Lorient, this is a team who traditionally do play outside the top flight, not a massive club. They've yo-yoed between the divisions quite a bit. The season before last, they finished 10th, which was a massive overachievement for a club like that. So he'd had a really good season the season before last. And I did read that he'd been high up on the list when Nice were trying to appoint a manager, and instead they went with Farioli, who's the guy that we were also linked with, and he was linked with the Leeds job when Daniel Farke got it. So I think this is a case of, this is a coach who a lot of clubs have been looking at from afar and admiring, and Sunland have perhaps sensed the opportunity here, because it's not went well for him last season. Lorient probably just to curry favour with their fans and get themselves back on track next year, probably need a fresh start in a new division. It's all just worked out well for Sunland in that sense, and what I would say is, whilst a lot of fans don't particularly trust the owner and the sporting director, they've took their time for a reason. I think while a lot of people thought this was an example of them dragging their feet or scrambling, we know that they wanted Will Still initially, but in the period of time between Still rejecting us and them moving on to another candidate, in this case Le Bris, apparently he's had to wait for a work permit, which hasn't been easy, and it's took quite a while. So I do think they've done their research on this guy. Obviously, the proof of the pudding will be in the eating. There's no doubt about that. He's got a season ahead now where he needs to have Sunland challenging, and there's a lot he needs to do. But I do feel excited by this appointment, more so because I don't know much about him, and that's intriguing. And I was thinking, sort of over my time as a fan, how many times have we made an appointment like this? A little bit out of the ordinary. You know, even in the case of Roy Keane and Paolo Di Canio, those were two names I was familiar with. So whilst, they were a bit sort of left field appointments, you kind of knew what you were going to get from both, given that they're such big personalities. Everybody knew who they were, what they were like as players. Well, this guy, we really don't know. And all appointments are gambles, aren't they? There's nothing different in this case. They're all gambles. At some point, he's going to lose his job, because they all do. They never stay forever. Particularly at Sunland, you're lucky if you see a season out. But in his case, it has to be when he does leave, whether that's in a year or 2 or 3, hopefully, after he's been successful, hopefully. When he does leave, what state does he leave us in? That's the exciting thing for me. I'm just really looking forward to seeing what he can do.
No, that's right. And I think, there was an awful lot of people have got sort of embroiled in this, we've been without a manager for 115 days or 120 days and got increasingly worked up about it. And I think that's probably a symptom of there being no football to watch, because since the Euros have started, that's calmed a little bit, hasn't it?
Yeah.
But as you and me and Chris said when we did our sort of managerial review podcast at the end of the season, as long as we've got the right person in place at the start of pre-season training, we're all fairly content with that scenario playing out. And, as it kind of goes on, you get a bit more panicky, especially when, there's journalists and Twitter accounts saying, this fella's rejected Sunderland, this fella's rejected Sunderland. They all want the clicks to the website, they all want the likes on the profiles, they're all doing it for a reason that's not necessarily, coming down to reporting the facts or anything like that. It's all for engagement. And I think, you've always got to be mindful about how you're actually being used when you're online. But, the fact is, as you sort of alluded to there, if we wanted to take the easy route out, and I've said it on the site and I've said it before, if we want to take the easy route out, we could have had Kevin Phillips, Jermaine Defoe, whoever else, sat in the stadium on the Chef Wed game and unveiled them at half-time on the pitch. If it was just a matter of getting a manager, that bit's dead easy. It's getting the right one, right?
That bit was lost in translation a little bit as well, because I think a lot of people assumed that we just weren't an attractive option to managers. I think what it is that you've got to kind of remember where we are, and you've got to kind of remember what, we finished 16th in the championship last season. So if Will Still gets an offer from Lons, he's going to go. That's just unfortunately the way it is. It doesn't mean we're not an attractive option. And you're bang on. We could have had anybody in that post ages ago. The amount of high-profile ex-players who've come out and declared their interest in the job. You mentioned 2 there, Phillips, Defoe. I think Robbie Keane did it. Dwight York.
Yeah.
Like the same names get mentioned. You're right. We could have appointed any of those people and more. The ones who weren't speaking out publicly, who would have people who crawl over broken glass to be the Sunderland manager, whether Speakman's the sporting director or not.
Yeah.
I don't get it and I didn't get it when people were making out as though we weren't an attractive option, because I think we were. I just think there was more to it, and we weren't hearing what that was.
No, but I think there's some assumptions being made, and some of them are reasonable, and probably some of them a bit far-fetched, right? So if we're pursuing the only buy players under the age of whatever, don't buy players or pay a fee for players over the age of whatever, focus on developing players, giving young players exposure, all that sort of stuff. There might be some managers who go, you know what, that's not for me, because this season I can't see them getting up. So, we might be limiting the attractiveness of the job for some people, but also by virtue of doing that, you're increasing the attractiveness of it for other types of head coaches, right? Yeah. So you've got that bit to think about. You've also got, as you say, the attractiveness aspect. Now, you and me sat here, it's dead easy to go, Sunderland should be the really attractive job for anybody who's got any ambition in football at all, because you can get Sunderland up, and the person who does it, they'll be a hero, they'll have a statue outside the stadium forevermore. Like, that's us as Sunderland supporters. And you can see, we all know the potential of the club, right? For somebody like Now, we don't even know how close or otherwise people like Liam Rossini were, or Scott Parker were in the job, or whoever else that they've talked to. But if you're looking at that and go, okay, I want to take a championship job next season, Burnley's available. Now, I don't care what anybody thinks about the size of Burnley and the size of Sunderland. We all know that we think we're a bigger club than Burnley. For a manager who's got no allegiance to either, going to Burnley, where they've got a better squad than we have, parachute payments, they'll probably go up next season in an automatic place, regardless of who's in charge. Yeah. You're going to go there, right? That's the unfortunate reality of where we're at now. And you can argue whether that should be the case and all that sort of stuff. But the fact is, I would say 99 out of 100 managers would probably take the Burnley job if the two of them are offered side by side. So you've got that bit to contend with as well. We know that Will Still was first choice. That was apparent in December. And we couldn't get him then, so we moved on. And, if you kind of look at the profile, he seems fairly similar. Bilingual, and obviously we've got a big French influence in the playing squad. So he's bilingual, can coach, very much a coach as opposed to an old-fashioned manager. Bris a bit older, I think he's 48, 49. But he's had 20 years of youth team coaching, sport and academy director or whoever he was for the majority of that time. So in terms of being a head coach, he's still quite a young head coach. He's only had 2 seasons as a head coach, hasn't he? So he's still kind of probably finding his feet in that lead position. And, you can see why he's been appointed. As I said before, bilingual, can work with the French lads as well as the English lads, but also very used to working with younger players, developing them, bringing them on, setting them up. And I think the intriguing and exciting thing when you read about him is his tactical stuff. Now, whether that could either go one way or the other, couldn't it? But it looks as if we're trying to do things a little differently again with that side of things. It's good. Look, people keep going on about the relegation side of things. Peter Reid got relegated with us before he got us back up and established us. Like, good managers suffer relegation. That's not a deciding factor. I think the issue there is he's had 2 seasons in charge and one of them end up in relegation. David Moyes got relegated with us. And I know that all of us as Sunderland fans will probably have a general consensus of David Moyes that matches with each other. But outside of Sunderland, he's looked at as a really good top-level manager, isn't he? So, it's not a defining moment for him.
No.
I say he's in for pre-season. He's got the whole time to work with the squad. And, what we need to hope now is that very quickly he's talking with the likes of Chris Rigg, talking with the likes of Jack Clark, and things happen in that respect. And then we can have a look at who we add to the squad for next season. But, no, it does feel good. It does feel a bit reassuring, doesn't it, to have it done and you kind of know what you're dealing with when you're looking ahead to next season.
Yeah, and look, I think there's been a lot of criticism of the way the club have approached this. And you mentioned it before. I think a lot of the tension has been whipped up by journalists, digital journalists, social media accounts who thrive off the controversy.
Have ulterior motives, don't they?
Absolutely. And I think that's where a lot of the frustration has come from. Because when you sit down and talk to people about it and actually lay out the way things have worked, I speak to people at work and people I know and stuff about it, and we're all pretty much on the same page when you actually talk about it and you think about like what was needed. They needed to take the time. They needed to make sure they got it right. That's exactly what they've done. I've got no problem with their approach. What they didn't do was leak out enough information to satiate people and really dampen some of the rumour. I know that when, for instance, Alan Nixon put out a story, didn't he, that Dave Challoner and Stephen Robinson were on our list of candidates. And within hours, the club issued something to the BBC to basically say, no, that's not true. I mean, that's what you're dealing with, though. And if the club can't spend all day just responding to social media rumours, but I do think that's played a huge part in the frustration. Because you look, now that the appointment's been made, everybody's calm. Everybody's, and that's, to me, like I said, all they had to do was get it done by pre-season. That was all that was important. And that's been the case. He's in. And whether he becomes a success or not is a totally different discussion altogether. But I just think that there's a lot to be learned from what happened over this summer, in that the club just got on with their business, did what they wanted to do, rather than bowing, I guess, to pressure and appointing somebody rather than waiting for the man they wanted. And I'm happy with that. Whether he turns out to be the right person, I've got no idea. You touched on something before there about, he's got to get in there and talk to certain players about the futures and things like that. What do you think his first tasks actually are? He starts work on the 1st of July. I'm sure he's done loads of preparation. I'm sure he's spent the whole summer learning about the club, watching games, learning about his players. But what do you think the first things he needs to do are to ensure he gets off to a good start?
Well, I think the way that Sunderland operates now, obviously player recruitment and contracts and all that are handled elsewhere, aren't they? So I'm sure he will have a part to play in talking to Chris Rigg or Jack Clark or whoever it is, but that side of things is handled elsewhere. He'll have a part to play in the recruitment because, there's certain positions that were glaringly weak last season. And like when you read about his style of play as well, one of the things that his style of play relies on is a 18-yard box goal scorer. We haven't got one. So, we need one of those, and he'll obviously have input into that too. The thing that he's going to need to get on with immediately from the start of pre-season training is getting the players coaching how he wants to play them. So how he wants them to play. And this is the good thing about having somebody in right now. How often have we had managerial appointments where they come in, they've got 2 days to work with the players and they've got a game, and Michael Beale, regardless of what you think of him and whether he should have been appointed and how things played out, we said at the time, he came in, he had a game, he had a couple of days, he had a game, had a couple of days, a game, a couple of days, and you don't have time to actually put your plan or style play into place or anything like that. So he seems to have a very tactically driven, strategic style of play, which involves all of the players knowing exactly what the jobs are, how he wants them to play. And the great thing is he's got all the pre-season to get that message across.
It's the ideal scenario, isn't it, really, for a manager coming in?
Yeah, and I think that's why they waited, because, even if we'd appointed somebody in March, which short-term we'd have been better off doing, the results probably would have been better, you'd hope, than they were in the last third of the season. But if you brought somebody in when Beale left, he's immediately into that thing of game, train. You haven't got time to work with the players and do something different. And by the time pre-season comes around, our perceptions of him are formed, the players' perceptions of him are formed, and it's hard to do anything too different or get anything different over to the players. So I think it is the ideal scenario, and that's what they've been working towards and planning for. So I think, from my perspective, him getting on the training field, getting the players coached in the way he wants them, building the relationships up with them, that's the priority, isn't it? And then everything else that happens around that, bringing new players in, players leaving, whatever, is key.
Yeah, and he's got to make a good first impression. I think the players will be like us, and the staff around the club will be like us. They'll be like, who's this guy? We don't know much about him.
Yeah.
First impressions count. Obviously, we know what happened with Michael Beale coming in and stuff. I don't think anybody was really sold on the idea of him being the head coach, and maybe he just didn't make a good first impression on the players or whatever, but they just didn't respond to him. Whereas with this guy, the players have been away all summer. They'll be excited to be back. They'll be excited to see their mates again. It's a good time to come in, but he's got to make a good first impression. The players and the staff have got to get a good feel for what his personality is. It was one of the first things he said in that statement which the club put out, was around wanting to get a feel for the club and learning about our culture in the city. I think it was literally the first line. He said, I'm honoured to be joining Sunland AFC and look forward to immersing myself in the culture of the club in the city. I believe the best way to understand and appreciate what makes a club unique is to connect with the people who embody its spirit, the supporters, the community, and all of those who contribute to its character. And then he goes on and on about the way he feels about how he should coach and get to know his players and stuff. But that is a good start, right? It's certainly stall out. I want to learn about this place. I want to learn about you as people. And hopefully that comes across when he meets the players on that first day, because they're going to want to feel impressed. I mean, we talk about the speculation that surrounded the club over the summer. The players will have been fully aware of that. They'll have seen it. They're all on social media. They'll have all been hounded, I'm sure, with messages asking who's the next manager going to be, blah, blah, blah. For them, they're going to want to walk in that first day and be like, you want to be impressed? I've listened to so many podcasts and interviews with former players where it's went one way or the other, and the manager's come in and they've tried to change too much too soon, and it's pissed the players off, and they've been a bit... Rafa Benitez has been accused of this quite a bit over his career, and that he's a tactician but not a man manager, and a lot of the players who've played under him could never warm to him. That's massive, I think, with Sunderland. I think there's a bit of a... You look down the years and you look at the managers who've been successful here, and we went into this when we did that management pod, but it's still true. You look at the type of manager who's been a success at Sunderland, And it's kind of been a bit of a cult of personality. Everybody swarms to them and looks to them to lead. And I think if he's going to be successful, that first couple of days where he meets the players and he gets to know them a little bit, he has to give off that impression that he's a big character, a big personality. Because if he's as good a coach as we're reading he is, and we're hearing he is, those other bits will just fall into place. The biggest part of this job for him is getting that connection between the players, the fans, everybody right immediately.
Yeah.
And coming across as a type of character that we can really throw our weight behind. If I was going to give him any advice, and I'm sure he'll have been given this advice from people at the club, it would be that he's got to make a good first impression, which sounds really obvious, but a lot of managers don't. They don't get that immediately. They come in and they think they know everything, and they think that they give off the impression that we should be honoured for them to be there, type of thing. As we've seen with lots of managers, particularly when Ellis Short was in charge, managers used to come in, think, oh, well, it's an easy payday, come in, Sunland, blah, blah, blah. I think now we need to start hiring people who see this as a really big opportunity. And he has to come in and he's made that impression immediately in his statement, of course, by saying that he wants to get a good impression of the people and immerse himself in it. But he has to actually do that. I think that would be my number one priority if I was him, is start that first day with a bang.
Yeah. And I think when he was at Lorient, they did do lots of things where he took the team out to different things in the city, different places of work and all that sort of stuff. We've seen it before at Sunderland with different managers doing that, haven't we? But just forming that connection between everybody is going to be crucial. I think Adil Ashisha's phone will be going nuts when it got announced, because he was at Lorient for a season under him.
Yeah.
He only played 11 or 12 times. I think he was injured for a bit of it, but didn't quite work out for him there. He signed a 4-year contract with them, and he was let go after a year. So it'll be interesting how that kind of plays out with not just with the Ashish, but how it's been going on in the background. Because obviously some of the French lads will be familiar with him. So there's that aspect to it as well. But we've given him a 3-year deal. We've obviously stuck a bit of a flag in the sand there and gone, he's our fella. Big opportunity for him, as you say. It looks like one where he wants to be here rather than thinks he's doing us a favour. He's chosen us because he hasn't got another job here or another job there. There's a lot to look forward to. I think, in the interest of balance, you've got to kind of go, well, it's not as if we've just appointed somebody who's won 2 back-to-back promotions and is on a complete crest of a wave. He's experienced some downside last season. We were saying before we came on, there was a point last season where the fans dumped 400 kilograms of rotten fish outside the training ground in protest. So it's not all been plain sailing, right? But he's got a lot of good attributes, I think, reading all about him, that will play well with us. The type of character he is, the type of football he likes to play. It's going to be interesting to see how we take him. And I think during pre-season, I bet you there's a number of interviews with him about approach to play and strategy and tactics and all that sort of stuff, because when you read how he likes his teams to play, there's a lot of passing around the back and waiting for the opposition to come towards you and then counter-attacking that. And you know what the crowd's like sometimes at the Stadium of Light, do 2 or 3 passes involving the goalkeeper, everyone gets a bit panicky and nervous, and you kind of want to launch it and kick it forward, man. What are you messing around for at the back? So I think there's actually going to be a bit of a PR thing around that during pre-season, around how football's evolved, changed. You look at how Man City play, you look at how other clubs play, and understand why we're passing around we're not passing around the back just for the hell of it. We're passing out the back to try to draw teams out and then spring them. So I actually think there'll be a bit of that in the club's media, and with interviews with him about how he likes to play, to kind of almost prepare people for it, because I think it'll be much more like a Gus Poyet style of football than anything else that we've seen subsequently.
Yeah.
Because that's kind of how we played under Poyet a bit, wasn't it? So I think that'll be interesting to watch how we handle that.
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the things that Christian Speakman said. He's aligned with delivering our play and identity, and he shares our ambition to win, as well as a passion for talent development.
See, that's a funny one, the playing identity, isn't it? I know we've kind of covered it a little bit before, but
what is it?
Well, precisely. And we've seen marked differences between Lee Johnson's style of play to Alex Neil's style of play to Tony Mowbray to Michael Beale to Mike Dodds. There hasn't been a consistency in that.
No.
So, I'm curious what our style of play actually officially is, because we've seen all sorts of variations of it over the past couple of years.
Yeah, well, obviously the best football we've seen, I would say the best football I've seen in my lifetime was that first season in the Championship under Tony Mowbray, and then probably the opening month or two, But so I actually said that on podcasts around the time. It's the best football I've ever seen Sunderland play. If it's that, then fantastic. But you saw when Beale came in, first thing he tried to do was make us more defensive.
And
so is that the style of play that they're talking about? That
Tony Mowbray style of play is what Tony Mowbray does. Talk to West Brom fans. That's the sort of style of football they were playing when Mowbray was manager of them in 2005 or 2006, whenever it was. So that's Tony Mowbray's style of football for me. So that's going to be a really interesting one to look at, because I don't actually understand how a club can have a style of play that a head coach doesn't have input into. I don't understand how that actually works. So
I don't know how clearly defined it is. It might just be more so like, in terms of playing,
play attractive football
and win. Well, yeah, but that's what everyone wants to do, don't they? I think, I think obviously, and we could go on about this all day, but something we've talked about on previous shows and stuff is that whoever comes in's got to get strikers scoring goals, right? So there has to be a change in the way we approach things. Well, that's one thing, but also, you look at what it takes to get a team out of the Championship. You can't just play. That style of football under Mowbray was lovely, but you're not going to get promoted playing that way, because some of the games which we didn't win, we should have won, was probably because we were just trying to play teams off the park rather than going away from home and setting up a little bit more defensively to counter and things like that. So that's one of the big things I'm interested in, is seeing how he likes us to play and how we actually play and whether the players respond to it, because that's another thing, the players will have loved playing under Tony Mowbray. They'll have loved that style of play. And you could tell they weren't enjoying the football last season. It was painful for us to watch, but you could tell on the pitch they weren't enjoying it.
And look, I think that's probably a good thing that we've had this sort of 6 months since Mowbray left, because it's kind of been cleared, hasn't it? And I think it is really difficult when a manager or a head coach comes in replacing somebody who's been popular with the fans and the players, which Mowbray was. So, Beale, and that's why Dodd's got an easy-ish ride in that second spell he had, because he replaced Beale, who wasn't popular. So, he kind of got let off an awful lot, which if it had been Beale in charge with those results and those performances, it would have been bloody chaotic, wouldn't it, in the stadium and games and stuff like that. So I think the fact he's not replacing Mowbray is good. I think if he'd come in December, it would have been a difficult thing because of replacing somebody who's popular. I think it's kind of been timed well to give him that pre-season to get his coaching style over and build relationships with everybody up. And, I think they've given him the best chance. Now, he's got to be back now in the transfer market. We've got to address those massive weaknesses that we've got in the playing squad, because, there's gaping positions which he'll be watching replays of games from last season going, shit, we need a striker, we need a bit of a stronger midfield player, we need this, we need that. So that's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting in terms of Anthony Patterson, because he likes his goalkeepers to play out and involves the goalkeepers an awful lot in that passing around the back. Is Patterson capable of doing that so frequently? Maybe not. But these are all things that he's going to work out, and they're going to sort of transpire over the pre-season and early on, aren't they? But it's going to be I am intrigued. I'm really intrigued by it, and you've got that bit of hope because it's the unknown. And with Tony Mowbray, as much as we grew to love him, we knew what his ceiling was as a manager. We knew he's never going to be a top Premier League manager. We know he's a good Championship manager, but probably a good top of mid-table Championship manager, not necessarily a Championship-winning Championship manager all the time.
Yeah, I think given he's managed 800 odd games and one promotion in that time, probably tells its own story, doesn't it?
So with this one, we don't know really what we're getting to. It could be anything, which again, it's interesting. It's exciting.
Yeah, and I think just to tail off, really, I think given everything that's gone on, I understand why people are probably even still a little bit frustrated. But I think for this guy to get off to a solid start, he really needs the fan base behind him initially. He needs people to get on board, and I think I'm hoping people can let go of some of that angst and negativity that has resulted, because last season was a disaster. It was crap. 2 very underwhelming transfer windows. They sacked a popular manager. I agreed with it, but, they didn't replace him effectively. Brought in somebody who nobody really wanted, and that went tits up, and then the season went to shit. Like, I totally get why people are pissed off, or probably feel a little bit more cautious about this than optimistic. But I don't know what you think about that, but I think people have just got to try and leave that aside now. We've got to move on, haven't we? Surely we've got to now kick on this season and try and see where this goes, and get. And I'm sure people will get behind them, but I'm hoping people can let go of some of that negativity and some of that tension.
All of us want to see Sunderland win, don't we?
Yeah.
All of us want to see Sunderland successful. All of us want us to challenge for the playoffs at the very least this season. And I'm sure everybody at the club wants that as well. So there's things that people have been frustrated by, and I've been frustrated by some of them too, and I can understand it. But it's like, we just need to support. That's by definition, as supporters, that's our job. Yeah. And that doesn't mean that we overlook things. If things are going terribly wrong, it's not as if we ignore that. But first and foremost, we've got to support the lads who go out on the pitch on Saturday, support the coach, and give him the best chance and see where we get to. Because I know for a fact, the seasons where everybody are on the same page, everybody's going for the same thing, everyone's supporting the team, those are the seasons that we see success or have a taste of success. And, it's not automatic. The team have to earn that. The manager has to earn it. We've got to see things that encourage that support and evolve that support. But, they're giving him a 3-year contract. Hopefully a few good signs follow him through the door. And we'll all have a bit of hope and enthusiasm for the new season. Because, again, this is a great one, isn't it? Because it's a complete unknown. And as football fans, right, we want something to cling on to for a bit of hope. We always want hope. That's what keeps us going. In the hope that we're going to win, the hope that we're going to get promoted, in the hope that next month's going to be better than this month, and the hope that next season's going to be better than the one that's just gone. And we've got, if we'd appointed Rossini, who's, I wouldn't have minded actually, and a number of people were keen on, but we know what he's a sort of mid-championship standard manager, potentially playoffs. We kind of know what we're going to get. It's the hopes diluted a little bit. Whereas this, you've got nothing to base it off, really, in terms of English football. So the hope's great. Like when, keep going back to when Roy Keane came in, he galvanised everybody. And, going back to your point before, that's what we kind of need this fella to do. We need him to get everybody on the same page, galvanise everybody. So when the first game of the season comes around, we're all delighted with what we have in prospect, and hopefully it gets off to a good start and it builds from there.
Absolutely. Anyways, we'll leave it there, mate. We've got loads of other things going on over the summer with pre-season starting soon, and I'm sure signings coming, and there'll be more details about the coaching staff coming out, I'm sure. So we'll have those things to talk about. We haven't even mentioned the fact we've already signed a player, but those things will come, I'm sure. It was nice just to get this one in and have a little bit of a chat about the new guy. And like I say, I get a good feel for these things from the kind of letters we get, because we get tons of emails every day from people giving us their thoughts on whatever's going on at the club. And, it's quieting down now. We've appointed someone, big style. we were getting like 20, 30 emails a day at one stage. It's quieting down a lot, but the majority of them now are really supportive. People just saying, right, come on, let's get behind them. Let's just move on. I think that goes without saying. I would imagine that's the default setting for all supporters, is just to, right, okay, let's crack on.
Let's give them a chance. That's all we can do.
Yeah, that's it. I think that's for the best for the club, really, isn't it? Is that everybody's on the same page. Fingers crossed that it keeps continuing in this mould. I'm looking forward to the next few weeks just to see what happens, see who we sign, see who else joins the club, and I want to hear from him as well. That'll be good. So we still haven't had Chris's thoughts on all this. He might be really against it, mightn't he?
He might be. Hey,
he might be kicking off. So Chris will be on at some point as well. Cheers, mate. Thanks for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone.
Cheers to the listeners. Like I say, we'll be back. If you missed the Twitter space on whatever day it was that we appointed him, Friday I think it was, or Saturday, or whenever it was, we did a Twitter space for an hour or so as well, which you can listen to and listen back to. You'll find it on the Roker Report feed on Twitter. And catch everything on the website over the coming days and weeks. We've got plenty of stuff still over the summer, looking at what's going on at the club, people giving their thoughts in fan letters and all the rest of it. So if you're looking for something else to chew on, make sure you head over to rokerreport.sbnation.com, and we'll catch you when we're back next time. See you later.